The blizzard hit Muskogee, Oklahoma Territory, with such sudden fury that Amelia Lancaster could barely see her own hands in front of her face as she stumbled through the snow. She had left the general store only 15 minutes earlier, foolishly thinking she could make it back to her boarding house before the weather worsened. But nature had other plans. The wind howled around her like a living thing, tearing at her wool cloak and numbing her fingers even through her gloves. Her feet had lost all feeling 5 minutes ago, and now she could barely lift them to push through the drifts that seemed to grow taller with each passing moment. She had been in Muskogee for only 3 weeks, working as a seamstress for Mrs. Henderson's dress shop. At 22 years old, she had finally worked up the courage to leave her aunt's house in St. Louis and venture into the Oklahoma Territory to make her own way in the world. It was 1889, and the land runs had brought all sorts of people flooding into the territory seeking opportunity and fortune. Amelia's dreams were more modest. She simply wanted independence, a trade of her own, and perhaps someday a small shop where she could create beautiful things without anyone telling her she was too quiet, too timid, too afraid of the world. Now she might freeze to death in that world before she ever got the chance to stop being afraid of it. The wind shoved her sideways and she stumbled, going down on one knee in the snow. The cold bit through her skirts immediately, and tears froze on her cheeks as she tried to stand. Her legs shook with exhaustion and cold. She had no idea which direction she was facing anymore. The buildings that lined the main street had vanished behind the white curtain of snow. Then, through the storm, she saw a dark shape. A building, a structure of some kind. She forced herself forward, each step an act of will, until her gloved hands touched rough wood. A barn. She felt along the wall until she found the door, and with the last of her strength, she pulled it open and fell inside. The sudden absence of wind felt like a blessing from heaven itself. Amelia lay on the barn floor, breathing hard, unable to do anything but exist for a long moment. Slowly, sensation began to return to her extremities, bringing with it a painful tingling. She pushed herself up to sitting and looked around. The barn was well maintained, with several stalls housing horses who stamped and whinnied softly at the intrusion. Hay bales were stacked neatly along one wall, and various tools hung in organized rows. A lantern burned low near the door, casting warm, golden light across the space. Someone took good care of this place. Well now, what do we have here? Amelia's head snapped up, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood in the doorway of what must be a small room attached to the barn, holding a cup of something that steamed in the cold air. He was tall, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for his living. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes were a striking pale blue that seemed to see right through her. "I am so sorry," Amelia stammered, struggling to her feet. Her legs wobbled beneath her. "I got caught in the storm. I did not mean to trespass. I will leave right away." "Leave?" The man set his cup down and crossed the barn floor in a few long strides. "You'll do no such thing. That storm out there will kill you in minutes. You're already half frozen as it is." He reached for her arm, and Amelia instinctively pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. The man stopped, his expression softening. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "But I am going to get you warm before you lose any fingers or toes to frostbite. My name is Yates Emerson. This is my barn, and you're welcome in it for as long as this storm lasts." "Amelia Lancaster," she whispered. "I work at Mrs. Henderson's dress shop. I was just trying to get back to my boarding house." "Mrs. Henderson's place is 2 miles from here," Yates said, frowning. "You walked way off course, but that's what these storms do. They turn the world white and steal all direction. He gestured toward the small room he'd emerged from. "I've got a stove going in my tack room. Come on." Amelia hesitated, every lesson about propriety and danger warring with the very real need to get warm. But Yates was already walking away, assuming she would follow. Something about his casual confidence made her feel marginally safer. She followed on unsteady feet. The tack room was small but warm, with a pot-bellied stove radiating heat into the space. Saddles and bridles hung on the walls, and a simple cot was pushed into one corner. A small table held the remains of a simple dinner and a well-worn book. "Sit," Yates said, pointing to a wooden chair near the stove. "Get those wet things off before you catch your death." Amelia sat, but her fingers were too numb and clumsy to work the buttons of her cloak. She fumbled with them, feeling tears of frustration prick at her eyes. "Here, let me help," Yates said. He knelt in front of her and began working the buttons with his larger but far more dexterous fingers. His touch was impersonal, efficient, but Amelia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment anyway. "I can manage," she protested weakly. "No, you can't," he said without any malice. "Your hands are frozen. Just let me help." He removed her cloak and then, before she could protest, began unlacing her boots. Amelia's embarrassment deepened into mortification, but she found herself unable to speak. No man had ever touched her feet before. It felt impossibly intimate, even through her stockings. Yates examined her feet carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "No frostbite, I think. You were lucky. Another 10 minutes out there and it would be a different story." He stood and crossed to a trunk, pulling out a thick blanket that he wrapped around her shoulders. Then he poured something hot from a pot on the stove into a tin cup and pressed it into her hands. "Coffee," he said. "Drink it slow. It'll help warm you from the inside." Amelia took a tentative sip and nearly sighed at the warmth that spread through her chest. She had never tasted anything so good. She drank slowly, as instructed, feeling life gradually return to her body. Yates settled himself on the edge of the cot, watching her with those unsettling blue eyes. Now that she could look at him properly, she realized he was probably close to her own age, perhaps 25 or 26. His face was tanned from working outdoors, with strong features and a firm jaw. He was handsome in a rugged sort of way that made Amelia's stomach flutter nervously. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me, for not turning me away." "What kind of man would I be if I turned away someone in need?" Yates asked. He smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable. "Besides, I could use the company. Storms like this can last for days. Gets lonely out here with just the horses to talk to." "Days?" Amelia's eyes widened in alarm. "But I cannot stay here for days. I have work, and people will talk. It would not be proper." "Proper won't matter much if you're dead," Yates said bluntly. "That storm is a monster. Nobody's going anywhere until it passes. And as for people talking, well, anyone with sense will know you got caught in the weather and took shelter where you could find it. Mrs. Henderson knows you're a good girl. She won't think poorly of you." Amelia bit her lip, anxiety churning in her stomach. She had spent her whole life trying to be good, to be proper, to never give anyone a reason to gossip or judge. The thought of being trapped alone in a barn with a strange man for days made her want to crawl out of her skin, even if that man had just saved her life. "I can see you're worried," Yates said gently. "I understand. You don't know me from Adam. But I give you my word as a gentleman that you're safe here. You can have the cot and I'll sleep in the loft with the hay. I won't touch you or bother you in any way. You have my word on that." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made Amelia want to believe him. She nodded slowly, clutching her cup of coffee like a lifeline. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." Yates nodded, seeming satisfied. "Good. Now have you eaten? I've got some stew left from dinner. It's not fancy, but it's hot and filling." Only then did Amelia realize she was starving. She had eaten a small lunch at noon, and it was now well into evening. "I do not want to take your food." "I've got plenty," Yates said, already ladling stew into a bowl. "And even if I didn't, I'd share what I had. That's just what people do out here." He handed her the bowl and a spoon, and Amelia ate gratefully. The stew was simple, just beef and vegetables in a rich broth, but it tasted like the finest meal she had ever had. As warmth and food restored her body, she began to relax slightly. The initial terror of the storm and the shock of finding herself alone with a strange man began to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity. "You live out here?" she asked between bites. "In the barn," Yates chuckled. "No, I've got a house about 100 yards that way." He pointed in a direction that Amelia assumed was east, though she had completely lost her bearings. "I was out here checking on the horses when the storm hit. Figured I'd stay put rather than risk the trip back. The house is well sealed. It'll weather the storm just fine without me." "What do you do?" Amelia asked, then immediately flushed. "I am sorry, that was too forward of me." "Not at all," Yates said easily. "I run a horse breeding operation. I raise and train horses, then sell them to ranchers, the army, whoever needs good stock. It's good work, honest work, I like it." "It must be difficult," Amelia said. "Taking care of so many animals. It keeps me busy," Yates admitted. "But I've got help during the day. A couple of young men from town come out to help with the feeding and training. It's just at night that I'm usually alone. Don't you have family?" The question was out before Amelia could stop it, and she immediately wished she could take it back. "Forgive me, I should not pry." "It's all right," Yates said, though his expression had grown more serious. "My parents are gone. My father died in the war when I was just a boy, and my mother passed 5 years ago from fever. I had a brother, but he headed west to California to seek his fortune. Haven't heard from him in 2 years. So no family to speak of, just me and the horses." The loneliness in his voice touched something in Amelia's heart. She knew what it was like to be alone, even if her circumstances were different. Her parents had died when she was 16, leaving her in the care of an aunt who had made it clear that Amelia was a burden she bore out of Christian duty rather than love. Coming to Muskogee had been an escape, but it had also been a leap into further isolation. "I am sorry," she said softly. "About your family." "Thank you," Yates said. "What about you? You said you work at Mrs. Henderson's. Where are you from originally?" "St. Louis," Amelia said. "I lived with my aunt there after my parents died. She took me in, but she did not really want me. I saved every penny I could from sewing work until I had enough to make a new start. Mrs. Henderson's sister lives in St. Louis and put in a good word for me, so here I am." "That took courage," Yates said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "Not many women would strike out on their own like that. Most would just marry the first man who asked to escape a bad situation." Amelia looked down at her empty bowl, her cheeks warming. "I am not the sort of woman men ask to marry." "And why's that?" Yates asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "I am too quiet," Amelia said, echoing what her aunt had told her countless times. "Too timid. I do not know how to flirt or make clever conversation. I am afraid of everything, and men do not want a frightened mouse for a wife." She expected him to agree, to confirm what she had always been told. Instead, Yates made a dismissive sound. "That's nonsense," he said firmly. "Being quiet doesn't make you weak, and being careful doesn't make you a coward. You walked alone through a blizzard rather than impose on a stranger. You left everything you knew to build a new life in a territory that's still barely settled. That's not timid, Amelia. That's brave." Amelia looked up at him, startled. No one had ever called her brave before. She did not feel brave. She felt scared most of the time, unsure of herself and her place in the world. But the way Yates looked at her, with something like respect in those blue eyes, made her wonder if perhaps he saw something in her that she could not see in herself. "I just did what I had to do," she said quietly. "That's what courage is," Yates replied. "Doing what needs to be done even when you're scared." The wind howled outside, rattling the barn walls, and Amelia was suddenly, acutely aware of how small the tack room was, how close they were sitting to each other. She felt a flutter of something in her chest that was not quite fear but was just as unsettling. She had never been alone with a man like this, never had a man look at her the way Yates was looking at her now, like she was someone worth knowing. She stood abruptly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "I should not keep you from your rest. You said I could have the cot." If Yates was disappointed by her sudden withdrawal, he did not show it. He simply nodded and stood as well. "Of course. Let me get you some more blankets from the house. I can make it there and back. I know the path well enough." "Please do not risk yourself on my account," Amelia protested. "I've walked that path in worse weather," Yates assured her. "I'll be fine. You just stay warm." Before she could argue further, he pulled on a heavy coat and disappeared out the door. Amelia stood alone in the tack room, listening to the storm and feeling oddly bereft. She had been alone for the better part of 3 weeks since arriving in Muskogee, keeping to herself in her boarding house room when she was not working. Loneliness was familiar, but somehow, after just an hour in Yates Emerson's presence, being alone felt different, emptier. She shook her head, trying to clear away such foolish thoughts. She had known this man for barely an hour. It was ridiculous to feel anything for him beyond gratitude for his help. And yet she could not deny the way her heart had lifted when he called her brave, or the way warmth had spread through her that had nothing to do with the stove when he smiled at her. Yates returned 20 minutes later, dusted with snow but carrying an armful of blankets and a pillow. He also brought a cloth bag that proved to contain bread, cheese, dried meat, and apples. "Supplies," he explained. "In case we're stuck here longer than expected. I've got water from the pump and coffee enough to last. We won't starve." "You are very kind," Amelia said. "I do not know how I can ever repay you." "No need for repayment," Yates said, already making up the cot with the blankets. "Like I said, it's just what people do. Now you get some rest. It's been a hard day for you. I'll be up in the loft if you need anything. Don't be afraid to call out." He lit a second lantern and handed it to her, then took his own and climbed the ladder to the loft above. Amelia heard him moving around up there, settling into the hay. Soon the sound stopped, and there was only the muted howl of the wind and the soft breathing of the horses in their stalls. Amelia lay down on the cot, pulling the blankets up to her chin. She should have been terrified, alone in a barn with a strange man in the middle of a blizzard. Instead, she felt safe, protected. It was a new feeling, one she was not quite sure what to do with. She closed her eyes and, to her surprise, fell asleep almost immediately. When Amelia woke, pale light was filtering through the cracks in the barn walls. The storm still raged outside, but its fury seemed slightly diminished from the night before. She sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The tack room was warm, the stove still radiating heat. Someone must have fed it during the night. She found her boots by the stove, now dry, and her cloak hanging from a peg. She dressed quickly, feeling self-conscious despite being alone. When she emerged from the tack room, she found Yates in the barn, forking hay into the stalls for the horses. He looked up when he heard her and smiled. "Morning," he said. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Amelia said. "Better than I expected, given the circumstances." "The storm's still going," Yates said, "but it's not as fierce as last night. I'm hoping it'll blow itself out by tomorrow. Until then, we're stuck." "Is there anything I can do to help?" Amelia asked. She hated feeling useless, and the thought of sitting idle in the tack room all day made her anxious. Yates looked surprised, then pleased. "You know anything about horses?" "Not much," Amelia admitted, "but I can learn, and I can certainly do something useful. Cook, perhaps, or mend." "Do you have clothes that need repairing?" "I've got a whole basket of shirts that could use some attention," Yates said, looking almost embarrassed. "I'm not much good with a needle, but you don't have to do that. You're not a servant here." "I know," Amelia said. "But I would like to do something to thank you, and it will give me something to occupy my time. I do not do well with idleness." Yates nodded slowly. "All right, then. Thank you, that's kind of you." They fell into an easy rhythm. Yates cared for the horses while Amelia went through his mending basket, settling herself near the stove in the barn where the light was better. She found his sewing kit, crude but functional, and set to work repairing torn seams, replacing buttons and darning holes. As she worked, Yates talked. He told her about the horses, each one by name and personality. There was Dancer, a gray mare who was flighty and temperamental. Thunder, a big black gelding who was gentle as a lamb despite his size. Starlight, a young filly who showed promise as a cutting horse. He spoke about them with obvious affection, and Amelia found herself charmed by his devotion to the animals in his care. "You really love them," she observed, looking up from her sewing. "They're honest creatures," Yates said. "A horse won't lie to you or betray you. If you treat them fair and take care of them, they'll give you everything they have. I respect that." "It sounds like you have been disappointed by people," Amelia said softly. Yates was quiet for a moment, leaning against the stall door. "Haven't we all?" he finally said. "But yes, I suppose I have been. When my mother died, I learned real quick who my real friends were. Most people couldn't be bothered to help. I managed because I had to, not because anyone stepped up to lend a hand. Made me appreciate straight dealing and honest work. Horses give me both." Amelia understood that bone deep. Her aunt's resentment, the coldness of her household, the way Amelia had been made to feel like an intruder in her own life. She had learned not to expect much from people either. "I understand," she said simply. Something in her tone made Yates look at her more closely. "I believe you do," he said quietly. At midday, they ate bread and cheese together, sitting in the tack room to escape the cold. The storm had picked up again, and snow was falling so thickly that the barn walls seemed to shake with the force of the wind. Amelia tried not to think about what would have happened if she had not found the barn, if Yates had not been there. She would be dead in a snowdrift somewhere, frozen and alone. The thought made her shudder. "You all right?" Yates asked, concern in his voice. "Just thinking about how close I came to dying yesterday," Amelia admitted, "if I had not found your barn." "But you did," Yates said firmly. "You're safe now, that's what matters." "Is it fate, do you think?" Amelia asked. "That I ended up here at your barn instead of anywhere else?" Yates considered this seriously. "I don't know about fate, but I do know I'm grateful you ended up here. Not just because I got to help someone who needed it, but because—" He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "Because I'm enjoying your company. It's been a long time since I had someone to talk to who really listened, who understood." Amelia felt her cheeks warm, but she did not look away from his steady gaze. "I am enjoying your company too," she admitted softly. "You have been very kind to me. More than kind. You have made me feel welcome instead of like an imposition." "You could never be an imposition," Yates said, and there was something in his voice that made Amelia's heart skip. "You belong here with me now, at least until the storm passes." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that went beyond their literal truth. Amelia felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove and everything to do with the way Yates was looking at her. Like she mattered. Like he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one else ever had. "Tell me about St. Louis," Yates said, breaking the moment before it could become too intense. "What was it like growing up there?" Amelia let out a breath she had not realized she was holding and began to talk. She told him about the city, the crowds, the noise and bustle that had both thrilled and terrified her. She told him about learning to sew from her mother, before the fever took both her parents. About the quiet house where she lived with her aunt, where she was expected to be silent and useful and grateful for the roof over her head. "It sounds lonely," Yates said when she finished. "It was," Amelia agreed, "but it taught me to be independent, to rely on myself, and it made me determined to build a different kind of life once I had the chance." "What kind of life do you want?" Yates asked. No one had ever asked her that before. Amelia thought carefully before answering. "I want a place of my own," she said slowly. "A shop, perhaps, where I can create beautiful dresses for women who will appreciate the work that goes into them. I want to be respected for my skills, not just tolerated because of duty, and I want—" She trailed off, suddenly shy. "What?" Yates prompted gently. "I want to matter to someone," Amelia finished in a whisper. "I want to be more than just a burden or an obligation. I want to be chosen, wanted." The vulnerability of the admission made her want to take the words back, to hide behind her usual reserve. But Yates did not laugh or dismiss her words. Instead, he reached across the small space between them and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "You matter," he said firmly. "And any man who can't see what a gift it would be to have someone like you in his life is a damn fool." Amelia's breath caught. She looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt. How safe. She had been so afraid of men, of their strength and unpredictability. But Yates was showing her that strength could be gentle, that a man could be powerful without being threatening. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined while the storm raged outside. Finally, Yates released her hand, though he looked reluctant to do so. "I should check on the horses again," he said. "Make sure they've got water." Amelia nodded and watched him go, her hand still tingling where he had held it. She pressed it to her chest, over her racing heart, and wondered what was happening to her. She had known this man for less than a day, and yet she felt more connected to him than she had to anyone in her entire life. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The rest of the day passed in a pleasant haze. Amelia finished mending Yates's shirts and started on a pair of trousers that needed patching. Yates worked with the horses, teaching Amelia little bits about their care when she expressed interest. He showed her how to brush Thunder's coat, standing behind her to guide her strokes, and the warmth of his presence at her back made her dizzy. They cooked dinner together, a simple meal of bacon and beans that somehow tasted wonderful. They talked about everything and nothing, books they had read, places they wanted to see someday, childhood memories, both good and bad. With every word, every shared laugh, Amelia felt the walls around her heart crumbling. As darkness fell and they retired to the tack room, Amelia found herself reluctant to say goodnight. She wanted to keep talking, to stay in Yates's presence, to bask in the warmth of his attention, but propriety demanded she retire to the cot while he climbed to the loft. "Good night, Amelia," Yates said softly, pausing at the base of the ladder. "Good night, Yates," she replied. Their eyes met and held, and Amelia saw in his gaze the same reluctance she felt, the same pull. Then he smiled, just a little, and climbed the ladder to the loft. Amelia lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the barn. The storm was definitely lessening. By tomorrow, it would probably be safe to leave. The thought filled her with a confusing mix of relief and disappointment. She wanted to get back to her life, to ease Mrs. Henderson's worry about her absence. But she did not want to leave this strange little bubble of warmth and safety she had found with Yates. She did not want to leave him. The realization struck her like a physical blow. She was falling for him, perhaps had already fallen. It was ridiculous, impossible, and yet undeniably true. In less than 2 days, Yates Emerson had shown her what it felt like to be seen, to be valued, to matter to someone. He had been kind without expecting anything in return. He had made her feel brave instead of broken. How could she not fall in love with him? The question was whether he felt anything for her beyond natural kindness. He had held her hand, had looked at her with something warm in his eyes. But did that mean anything, or was she reading too much into simple gestures? Amelia had no experience with men or courtship. She had no idea how to read the signals, if there even were any signals to read. She finally drifted off to sleep with these thoughts churning in her mind, her dreams filled with blue eyes and gentle hands and a voice that called her brave. The next morning dawned clear and bright. The storm had blown itself out during the night, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and clean and sparkling in the early morning sun. It was beautiful, but Amelia's heart sank when she saw it. The storm was over. She would have to leave. Yates seemed subdued over breakfast, and Amelia wondered if he was thinking the same thing. They ate in near silence, the easy conversation of the previous day replaced by an awkward awareness of what came next. Finally, Yates cleared his throat. "I'll hitch up the sleigh and take you back to town," he said. "The roads will be impassable for a wagon, but the sleigh should manage." "Thank you," Amelia said softly. "You have been so kind." "It wasn't a hardship," Yates said, meeting her eyes. "Having you here these past 2 days has been." He paused, seeming to search for words. "It's been good, really good." "For me too," Amelia said. She wanted to say more, to tell him everything she was feeling, but the words stuck in her throat. Fear held her silent, the old familiar fear of rejection and disappointment. Yates stood abruptly. "I'll get the sleigh ready. You gather your things." He left before Amelia could respond. She watched him go, feeling like something precious was slipping through her fingers. She folded the blankets he had given her, putting the tack room back to order. Her cloak was dry and clean, her boots warm. In a few hours, she would be back at her boarding house, back to her regular life, and this interlude would be nothing but a memory. The thought was unbearable. Yates brought the sleigh around, a beautiful contraption pulled by thunder, the big black gelding. He helped Amelia up onto the seat, his hands warm even through her gloves. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to get Thunder moving. The ride into town was quiet. Amelia tried to memorize everything about this moment. The jingle of the harness bells, the squeak of the runners on the snow, the warmth of Yates sitting beside her. Too soon they were approaching Muskogee, and Amelia could see smoke rising from chimneys, signs of life returning to normal after the storm. "Where's your boarding house?" Yates asked. "Near the church," Amelia said. "Mrs. Bartlett's place." Yates nodded and guided Thunder through the snowy streets. A few people were out, digging paths through the drifts. They called out greetings to Yates, and Amelia saw curious glances turned her way. By nightfall, everyone in town would know she had spent the storm with Yates Emerson. She tried to care about the gossip, but found she could not. What did it matter what people thought if she never saw Yates again? They pulled up in front of the boarding house, and Yates helped her down from the sleigh. They stood in the snow, facing each other, and Amelia felt tears prick at her eyes. This was goodbye. She should thank him again, wish him well, and go inside. That was what a proper lady would do, but she had never been very good at being proper. "I will miss you," she blurted out before she could stop herself. "These past 2 days being with you, it was the happiest I have been in a very long time. And I know that sounds foolish because we hardly know each other, but it is the truth. You made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth something, and I will always be grateful for that." Yates stared at her, his blue eyes wide with surprise. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, transforming it into something radiant. "You think I'm ready to just let you walk away?" he asked softly. "Amelia, I've been trying to work up the courage all morning to ask if I could call on you, properly. Because you're right, these past 2 days have been the best I can remember. Having you in my barn, in my space, it felt right in a way nothing has felt right in a long time. You belong there with me. I knew it the moment you stumbled through that door, and I know it even more surely now." Amelia's heart soared. "You want to court me, if you'll let me," Yates said. "I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other, but I want to know you, Amelia. I want to know everything about you. What makes you smile, what you dream about, what you're afraid of. I want to be the one who makes you feel like you matter, because you do matter. To me, you matter tremendously." "Yes," Amelia breathed. "Yes, you can court me. I want that too." Yates's smile widened into a grin. He took her hand, raising it to his lips and pressing a kiss to her gloved knuckles. Even through the fabric, Amelia felt the warmth of the gesture all the way to her toes. "Then I'll come by tomorrow evening," he said. "We can take a walk if the weather holds. Or just sit and talk, whatever you'd like." "I would like that very much," Amelia said. She reluctantly pulled her hand from his and turned toward the boarding house. Mrs. Bartlett was at the door, her round face creased with concern and relief. "Amelia Lancaster, thank the Lord you're safe." "We have been beside ourselves with worry." "I am sorry, Mrs. Bartlett," Amelia said. "I got caught in the storm and had to take shelter. Mr. Emerson was kind enough to see me home." Mrs. Bartlett's shrewd eyes moved from Amelia to Yates and back again. Amelia braced herself for censure, for judgment, but instead the older woman smiled. "Yates Emerson is a good man," she said. "If he kept you safe through that storm, then I've no complaints. Come inside now, child. You must be exhausted. And Mr. Emerson, you're welcome to come in for coffee before you make the trip back." "Thank you kindly, Mrs. Bartlett," Yates said, "but I should get back to my place and make sure everything weathered the storm, but I appreciate the offer." He tipped his hat to both women, his eyes lingering on Amelia. "Until tomorrow," he said softly. "Until tomorrow," Amelia echoed. She watched him drive away, her heart full to bursting. Mrs. Bartlett put an arm around her shoulders and guided her inside, chattering about the storm and how worried everyone had been. Amelia heard maybe half of it, her mind still on the man in the sleigh and the promise of tomorrow. The next several weeks were the happiest of Amelia's life. True to his word, Yates came calling the next evening, and the evening after that, and the evening after that. They walked through the snowy streets of Muskogee, sat together in Mrs. Bartlett's parlor, and occasionally, when the weather was good, Yates would drive Amelia out to his ranch so she could see the horses. With each visit, Amelia fell more deeply in love. She learned that Yates sang while he worked, old songs his mother had taught him. That he read poetry, unlikely as it seemed for a rough horseman. That he had a dry sense of humor that could make her laugh until her sides ached. That he was thoughtful and considerate, always asking what she wanted to do rather than simply dictating their plans. And she could see that he was falling for her too. It was there in the way he looked at her, like she was something precious. In the way he listened when she talked, really listened, asking questions and remembering the little details she shared. In the gentle way he touched her hand when they walked, or brushed snow from her shoulders, or tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Mrs. Henderson was delighted by the courtship. "I always said Yates Emerson needed a good woman," she told Amelia one day at the shop. "And you need a good man. You make a fine pair." The other girls at the boarding house were less kind, whispering behind their hands about how strange it was that someone like Yates would court someone as plain and quiet as Amelia. But their jealousy could not touch her. She knew what she and Yates had was real, built on genuine connection rather than surface attractions. 2 months after the storm, on a clear February evening, Yates asked Amelia to come out to his ranch. He had something he wanted to show her, he said. Amelia agreed eagerly, bundling up in her cloak for the sleigh ride. When they arrived at the ranch, Yates did not take her to the barn as usual. Instead, he led her to his house, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that Amelia had never been inside before. "I wanted you to see it," he explained, opening the door, "because I'm hoping you'll agree to make it your home." Amelia stepped inside, her breath catching at the sight before her. The house was simple but well made, with a large main room dominated by a stone fireplace. A kitchen area occupied one corner, and she could see doorways leading to what must be bedrooms. But what caught her attention was the furniture. New furniture, recently purchased. A comfortable sofa, a rocking chair, a large table with 6 chairs around it, far more than a single man would need. "Yates?" she asked, turning to him with questioning eyes. He took both her hands in his expression serious but hopeful. "Amelia Lancaster, I know we have not been courting for very long. By society's standards, this is probably too fast and too sudden. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this. I love you. I love your kindness and your courage. I love the way you see the good in things. I love how you gentle the horses just by talking to them. I love your quiet strength and the way you face your fears even when they terrify you. I want you in my life, not just for now but forever. Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home? Will you build a life with me here?" Amelia felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Yates. I think I have loved you since that first night in the barn when you called me brave. You have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a place to belong. Someone who sees me for who I really am and loves me anyway. How could I not want to spend my life with you?" Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Amelia could hear his heart pounding, as fast as her own. Then he pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands and lower his lips to hers. It was Amelia's first kiss, and it was everything she had ever imagined and more. Gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, Yates's forehead resting against hers. "I'm going to make you happy," he promised. "Every single day I'm going to work to make you as happy as you make me." "You already do," Amelia whispered. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Muskogee. Mrs. Henderson stood up with Amelia, and one of Yates's hired hands served as his witness. It was small and intimate, just the way they both wanted it. Amelia moved into the ranch house, and to her surprise, settling into married life felt as natural as breathing. She and Yates fell into an easy rhythm, working together to run the household and the horse breeding operation. Amelia discovered she had a talent for the business side of things, keeping the books and corresponding with buyers. Yates taught her to ride, patiently guiding her through her fear until she could canter across the fields with confidence. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Amelia sewing while Yates read aloud from whatever book they were working through. Sometimes they talked for hours about their days, their dreams, their plans for the future. and sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, content just to be in each other's presence. The physical side of marriage was a revelation for Amelia. Yates was patient and gentle, teaching her pleasure with the same care he had used to teach her about the horses. She learned that her body was not something to be ashamed of, but something to be celebrated. That intimacy could be joyful and beautiful when shared with someone you loved. Spring came to Oklahoma Territory, turning the white landscape green and gold. The horse breeding business thrived under their combined efforts. They bought more land, expanded the barn, and hired another hand to help with the increased workload. One warm morning in May, Amelia woke feeling queasy. She barely made it outside before losing the contents of her stomach. Yates found her a few minutes later, pale and shaking. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Should I fetch the doctor?" Amelia looked up at him, a smile spreading across her face despite her discomfort. "No doctor needed," she said softly. "I think I am with child." The expression on Yates's face was one of pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, before setting her down quickly with an apologetic look. "Sorry, I should be more careful with you," he said. "I am not made of glass," Amelia said, laughing. "But yes, perhaps save the spinning for later." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Amelia continued to work, though Yates fussed over her constantly, trying to get her to rest more. In November, during an early cold snap that reminded them both of that fateful snowstorm, Amelia went into labor. It was long and difficult, but when Amelia finally held their son in her arms, every moment of pain was worth it. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and blue eyes like his father. "What should we name him?" Yates asked, sitting beside her on the bed, looking down at his son with wonder. "James," Amelia said, "after your father, James Emerson." Yates's eyes filled with tears. He kissed Amelia's forehead, then his son's. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me this, for giving me a family again." Little James was a happy baby who grew into a rambunctious toddler. He loved the horses as much as his father did, and could often be found trailing after Yates around the ranch, trying to copy everything his father did. 2 years after James's birth, Amelia gave birth to twin girls. They named them Sarah and Grace, and they had their mother's dark hair and gentle disposition. The house that had seemed so large when Amelia first saw it now felt perfectly sized, filled with the noise and chaos of 3 young children. The horse breeding operation continued to grow. Yates's reputation for quality stock spread throughout Oklahoma Territory and beyond. They were able to hire more help, build a new barn, and purchase even more land. But despite their success and prosperity, they never forgot where they had started. Every year, on the anniversary of the storm that had brought them together, Yates and Amelia would bundle up and walk out to the barn. They would stand in that same tack room where Amelia had spent her first night, and they would remember. Remember the fear and the cold, the kindness of a stranger, the beginning of something neither had expected but both had needed. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked one such anniversary, holding her close. "Getting caught in that storm, having your life turned upside down?" "Not for a single moment," Amelia said firmly. "That storm brought me home, it brought me to you. How could I regret that? You belong here with me," Yates said, echoing the words he had said so long ago. "You always have." "And I always will," Amelia promised. The children grew, bringing new joys and challenges. James proved to have his father's way with horses and took over more of the training as he got older. Sarah discovered a talent for drawing and would spend hours sketching the horses and the landscape. Grace was the social one, always organizing gatherings and making friends wherever she went. When James was 15, Yates received a letter from California. His brother, whom he had not heard from in over a decade, had fallen on hard times and was asking for help. Without hesitation, Yates sent money and an invitation to come to Oklahoma and work on the ranch. His brother arrived 3 months later, thin and worn but grateful. He stayed for 2 years, rebuilding his life, before heading back to California with a new wife and a real chance at success. The reconciliation healed something in Yates that Amelia had not even realized was still wounded. Amelia never did open her own dress shop, but she found that she did not mind. She sewed for pleasure now, creating beautiful clothes for her daughters and for the women in Muskogee who commissioned her work. She taught Sarah to sew, passing on the skills her own mother had taught her. It felt right, this passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. As the years passed, Oklahoma Territory became Oklahoma State. Muskogee grew from a small frontier town into a thriving city. The Emerson Ranch became a fixture of the community, known for quality horses and fair dealing. Yates and Amelia became pillars of the town, respected and liked by all who knew them. When James turned 20, he married a sweet girl from town named Elizabeth. They had their wedding at the ranch, and Amelia could not help but cry as she watched her son pledge his life to another. It seemed like just yesterday he had been a baby in her arms. The twins married within a year of each other. Sarah wed a teacher and moved to Tulsa, though she visited often. Grace married a banker's son and stayed in Muskogee, building a house just down the road from the ranch. Yates and Amelia became grandparents, and then grandparents again and again. Their house filled once more with the sound of children, though now they were children they could spoil and then send home. They taught their grandchildren to ride, to care for animals, to value hard work and honest dealing. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Yates threw a party at the ranch. It seemed like half of Muskogee showed up, testament to the lives they had built and the people they had become. After the guests had left and the children and grandchildren had gone home, Yates and Amelia stood on their porch, watching the sun set over the land they loved. 25 years, Amelia said wonderingly. Where did the time go? I don't know, Yates said, pulling her close. But I wouldn't trade a single moment of it. You have given me the best life I could have imagined, Amelia. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You saved my life that night, Amelia said. In more ways than one. I was so lost before I found you, so afraid and alone. You showed me what it meant to be brave, to be loved, to have a home. We saved each other, Yates corrected gently. You were just as much a rescue for me as I was for you. I was lonely and isolated, pushing people away because I was afraid of being hurt. You taught me to open up again, to trust, to love. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just existing. You gave me a life worth living. They stood there until the stars came out, holding each other, grateful for a snowstorm and a barn and the courage to say yes to something unexpected. The years continued to pass, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with a long life well lived. They lost Mrs. Henderson to old age, and then Mrs. Bartlett. They saw Muskogee get electricity and telephone lines, marveling at how much the world was changing. They weathered economic downturns and personal losses, always together, always supporting each other. When they were both in their 60s, Yates began to slow down. His joints ached on cold mornings, and he could no longer do the heavy work around the ranch. But James had taken over the day-to-day operations, running things with the same dedication and integrity his father had shown. Yates was able to step back, to finally rest, knowing his legacy was in good hands. Amelia's eyesight began to fail, making it difficult to do the detailed sewing she loved. But she found joy in other things, in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in sitting with Yates and reminiscing about their life together. intending the flower garden she had planted years ago. On a cold November evening, 40 years after that fateful snowstorm, Amelia and Yates sat by their fireplace. A light snow was falling outside, the first of the season. Yates held Amelia's hand, his grip not as strong as it once was but still warm and comforting. "You remember that storm?" Amelia asked, watching the snowflakes drift past the window. "Every detail," Yates said. "The way you looked when you stumbled through the barn door, half frozen and terrified. The way your eyes lit up when you smiled. The exact moment I knew I was going to fall in love with you." "When was that?" Amelia asked, even though she had heard the story countless times. "When you said you were afraid of everything, and I realized you were the bravest person I had ever met," Yates said. "You faced your fears every day and kept going anyway. That's true courage." "I loved you for that, and I have loved you every day since." "I loved you when you called me brave," Amelia said. "When you made me feel like I was worth something, like I mattered. You have spent 40 years proving that love to me, Yates. 40 years of making me feel cherished and valued and safe. I could not have asked for a better husband or a better life." "We have been blessed," Yates agreed. 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren so far, a successful business, a good life. But my greatest blessing has always been you, Amelia. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow and the fire, content just to be together. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, and Amelia shivered despite the warmth of the fire. "Cold?" Yates asked. "A little," Amelia admitted. "Winter is harder on these old bones than it used to be." Yates stood, moving slower than he once had, and fetched a blanket. He wrapped it around Amelia's shoulders, then sat back down and pulled her close to his side. She rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that as the snow fell heavier outside. "You think you would have been happy if that storm had never happened?" Amelia asked. "If we had never met?" Yates was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think I would have survived," he finally said. "I would have kept running the ranch, kept raising horses, kept existing, but I would not have been truly happy. You brought joy into my life, Amelia. You brought love and laughter and purpose. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better. Without you, I would have been only half alive." "I feel the same," Amelia said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions of living. I was so afraid of everything, so convinced I was not good enough to deserve happiness. You showed me that I was wrong. You loved me into bravery. You loved me into believing in myself. You gave me everything I never dared to dream of. That storm was the best thing that ever happened to both of us," Yates said. "It was fate, I think. It had to be. What else could explain you ending up at my barn of all the places you could have found shelter?" "Divine providence," Amelia suggested with a smile. "God looking out for 2 lonely people who needed each other." "I can believe that," Yates said. He kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "I thank God for you every day, Amelia Emerson. Every single day." They stayed up late into the night, talking about their life together, their children, their hopes for the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would carry on after they were gone. When they finally retired to bed, Yates held Amelia close, and they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had done for 40 years. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in white, just as it had done so long ago. But this time, the barn was full of horses breathing warmly in their stalls. The house was full of memories and love, and 2 people who had found each other against all odds slept peacefully, knowing they had lived a good life together. Spring came again, as it always did, melting the snow and bringing new life to the land. James and Elizabeth's oldest son announced his engagement. Sarah visited with her children, filling the house with noise and laughter. Grace brought over a new great-grandchild for Yates and Amelia to meet, a little girl with dark hair and blue eyes who they all agreed looked just like her great-grandfather. Life continued, rich and full, surrounded by the family they had created and the love that sustained them through everything. On warm evenings, Yates and Amelia would sit on their porch, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. They had built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone. As the years advanced and they both grew older and frailer, they remained devoted to each other. Yates helped Amelia when her eyesight made walking difficult, and Amelia helped Yates on mornings when his joints were too stiff to move easily. They had learned to lean on each other, to accept help graciously, to face the challenges of aging as they had faced everything else in their life together. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children threw another party at the ranch. The whole family gathered, 3 generations celebrating the love story that had started it all. During the party, James stood and offered a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "You have shown us all what true love looks like. You have built a legacy not just in this ranch, but in the values you have passed down: hard work, integrity, kindness, and above all, love. Unwavering, steadfast love that has weathered every storm. Thank you for the example you have set. Thank you for the home you have built. And thank you for loving each other so well that we all knew what to look for in our own marriages." Everyone raised their glasses, and Amelia felt tears slip down her cheeks. Yates squeezed her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. 50 years, he murmured to her under the sound of the celebration, "and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat." "So would I," Amelia said. "Every single moment." That night, after the guests had gone home and they were alone again, they walked out to the barn together. It took longer than it used to, their steps slower and more careful, but they made it. They stood in the tack room, now used for storage, and remembered that long-ago night when a desperate woman had stumbled through the door and into the arms of the man who would become her everything. "You belong here with me," Yates said, just as he had said all those years ago. "I always have," Amelia replied, just as she always did. They walked back to the house hand in hand, their love as strong as ever, tempered by time and trial into something unbreakable. They had been given a gift that night in the storm, the gift of finding exactly what they needed in each other. And they had spent 50 years proving worthy of that gift, building a life of love and purpose that would echo through the generations to come. As they settled into bed that night, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the frightened girl stumbling through a snowstorm to the woman lying beside the man she had loved for half a century. She had found her place in the world, her home, her purpose. She had found the courage she never knew she possessed, and she had found a love that had sustained her through every joy and sorrow life had offered. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, seeing her thoughtful expression. "How lucky I am," Amelia said simply. "How blessed. That storm could have killed me. Instead, it gave me life. Real life, with you." "We were both lucky," Yates said. "Sometimes I wonder what I did to deserve you, to deserve this life we have built." "You were kind when you did not have to be," Amelia said. "You saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself. You loved me patiently until I learned to love myself. That is what you did to deserve this life. You chose compassion over convenience, love over loneliness, and you have chosen me every day for 50 years. And I will choose you every day for whatever time we have left," Yates promised. They fell asleep together as they had done thousands of times before, secure in their love and grateful for every moment they had been given. The years that followed were quieter, slower, but no less full of love. They celebrated the births of more great-grandchildren and eventually a great-great-grandchild. They watched their ranch continue to thrive under James's leadership. They spent long afternoons sitting together, not always talking but always connected, comfortable in the silence that came from knowing someone so completely that words were often unnecessary. When Yates was 78, he fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor warned that, at his age, recovery would be difficult. Amelia barely left his bedside, holding his hand and talking to him even when he was too weak to respond. She told him stories of their life together, reminded him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. She was not ready to let him go, but Yates rallied, his stubborn strength pulling him through. When he was finally well enough to sit up and eat solid food again, he looked at Amelia with tears in his eyes. "I heard you," he said. "When I was so sick I could barely breathe, I heard your voice. You kept me anchored, gave me a reason to fight." "I cannot do this life without you," Amelia said fiercely. "Not yet. I am not ready." "Neither am I," Yates said. He pulled her close and she climbed carefully into the bed beside him, holding him as tightly as she dared. "I am not ready to leave you. Not now, not ever." He recovered slowly but surely, and life returned to normal. They were more careful now, more aware of how precious and fleeting time was. They made sure to say "I love you" every day, sometimes multiple times a day. They did not let disagreements fester or pride keep them apart. They had learned long ago that life was too short for such foolishness. On a warm summer evening when they were both in their 80s, they sat on their porch as the sun set. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter floating on the evening air. The ranch stretched out before them, the land they had worked and loved for so many years. "We did good, didn't we?" Yates said, watching the children play. "We did very good," Amelia agreed. "We built something beautiful, something that will last long after we are gone." "Do you have any regrets?" Yates asked. Amelia thought about it carefully. "I wish we had more time," she finally said. "I wish I could live 100 more years with you, but regrets? No. How could I regret anything about a life lived with you?" "I feel the same," Yates said. He took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "You have been my greatest adventure, Amelia, my greatest love, my greatest blessing." "And you have been mine," Amelia said. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. When the stars began to appear, one by one, they went inside together to the home they had made, to the life they had built, surrounded by the love that had sustained them through everything. Years passed, and eventually, their children began to worry about them living alone so far from town. But Yates and Amelia refused to leave the ranch. This was their home, the place where they had built their life together. They would stay here for as long as they could. James moved back to the main house with his wife to help care for them, and Amelia was grateful for the company and the help, even if she would not admit how much she needed it. Grace visited daily, bringing food and checking on them. Sarah came as often as she could from Tulsa, staying for weeks at a time. When Amelia was 86, she became ill. It was not sudden or dramatic, just a slow fading. She grew weaker, sleeping more, eating less. The doctor said there was nothing to be done. She was simply worn out, her body ready to rest after a long life well lived. Yates rarely left her side. He would sit beside her bed, holding her hand, talking to her about their life together. On her last day, when the whole family had gathered, she opened her eyes and looked at him with the same love she had shown him for 57 years. "I am not afraid," she said softly. "You taught me to be brave, remember?" "You were always brave," Yates said, tears streaming down his face. "The bravest person I ever knew." "I love you," Amelia said. "I have loved you from that very first night. Thank you for giving me such a beautiful life." "I love you too," Yates said. more than words can say. You are my heart, Amelia, you always have been." She smiled at him, squeezed his hand one last time, and closed her eyes. She slipped away peacefully, surrounded by the family she had helped create, held by the man who had been her everything. The funeral was held at the ranch, and it seemed like the entire town of Muskogee turned out to pay their respects. Person after person stood and told stories of Amelia's kindness, her skill with a needle, her gentle wisdom. But the most moving tribute came from Yates himself. Standing at his wife's graveside, his voice shaking but clear, he told the story of a snowstorm and a frightened young woman who had stumbled into his barn and changed his life forever. He told them how she had taught him to love again, how she had given him a family and a purpose, how she had been his partner in every sense of the word, working beside him to build the life and legacy they now all shared. "She was the best thing that ever happened to me," he finished, his voice breaking. "And I was the luckiest man in the world to have been loved by her." After the funeral, James tried to convince Yates to move into town to live with one of the children. But Yates refused. He stayed at the ranch in the house he and Amelia had shared for so many years. He could feel her presence there in every room, every corner. He was not ready to leave that behind. He lived for 2 more years, tending to his flower garden, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and visiting Amelia's grave every day without fail. He told her about his day, about the family, about how much he missed her. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, he could almost feel her sitting beside him, her hand in his. On a cold November night, exactly 59 years after the storm that had brought them together, Yates passed away in his sleep. The family found him the next morning, peaceful and still, a slight smile on his face. On the table beside his bed was an old photograph of him and Amelia on their wedding day, young and full of hope and love. They buried him beside Amelia, and the whole town mourned the loss of a good man who had lived his life with integrity and love. At the funeral, James told his children and grandchildren the story of the snowstorm, of the brave woman and the kind man who had found each other when they needed it most. He told them that this was their legacy, this love story that had created their family. "They showed us what real love looks like," James said. "Not the easy, romantic kind you see in books, but the kind that shows up every day, the kind that weathers storms and hardship and loss, the kind that builds something beautiful that lasts beyond a single lifetime. That is what they gave us. That is what we must honor by loving each other just as well." The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations just as Yates and Amelia had hoped. Their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren all knew the story of how it started, of a snowstorm and a barn and 2 people who chose to say yes to something unexpected. In the barn, which had been renovated and expanded many times over the years, the old tack room was preserved as a sort of shrine. Pictures of Yates and Amelia hung on the walls, along with their story written out by one of their grandchildren. Young couples would sometimes visit, asking to stand in the place where such a great love story had begun, hoping some of that magic would rub off on them. And on cold November nights, when snow fell soft and silent over the Oklahoma landscape, the family would gather at the ranch. They would stand at the graves of Yates and Amelia Emerson and remember the love that had built this family. Remember the courage it took to open your heart to another person. Remember that sometimes the storms of life, as frightening as they might be, can lead you exactly where you need to be. The story of Yates and Amelia became a legend in Muskogee, told and retold over the years. It was a story about fate and courage, about finding love in the most unexpected places. But most of all, It was a story about two people who recognized in each other exactly what they needed and chose to build a life together based on mutual respect, unwavering support, and deep, abiding love. And though they were gone, their love lived on in the family they had created, in the land they had nurtured, and in the example they had set. They had proved that true love does exist, that it can weather any storm, and that it creates a legacy that extends far beyond a single lifetime. The ranch house still stood strong, a testament to their hard work and dedication. The horses still ran in the fields, descendants of the stock Yates had so carefully bred. And every year, on the anniversary of that fateful snowstorm, the family would gather to celebrate not just Yates and Amelia, but the love they had shown was possible. They had started with nothing but a storm, a barn, and a chance encounter. They had built an empire of love, family, and legacy that would endure for generations. And it all began with a simple act of kindness. A cowboy who opened his door to a frightened stranger and recognized in her the missing piece of his own heart. That was the true magic of their story. Not that they had found each other, though that was remarkable enough, but that they had taken that chance encounter and turned it into something extraordinary. They had chosen each other every single day for nearly 6 decades, through joy and sorrow, through prosperity and hardship, through youth and old age. They had shown their children and grandchildren what commitment really meant, what partnership really looked like. In a world that often felt chaotic and uncertain, where love was sometimes treated as disposable and commitment as old-fashioned, the story of Yates and Amelia stood as a reminder that real love still existed, that it was worth fighting for, worth working for, worth choosing every single day, that two people who were willing to be vulnerable, to be brave, to open their hearts could create something beautiful that would echo through eternity. The snowstorm had lasted only 2 days, but the love it sparked had lasted a lifetime. And as the family continued to gather at the ranch year after year, decade after decade, they carried forward the legacy of that love. They told the story to their children, who told it to their children, ensuring that Yates and Amelia Emerson would never be forgotten. And on winter nights, when snow fell over the Oklahoma landscape and the wind howled around the old barn, some swore they could feel a warmth emanating from that place. A reminder that love, true love, never really dies. It lives on in the hearts of those who were touched by it, in the legacy left behind, in the story passed from one generation to the next. Yates and Amelia had found each other in a storm, and they had created from that chance encounter a love that would weather every storm life threw at them. They had built a family, a home, and a legacy that proved love was not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment, a daily decision to show up for another person no matter what. That was their gift to their family and to the world. The knowledge that love like theirs was possible, that it was real, that it could last. And that sometimes, when you least expect it, a storm might blow into your life and bring with it exactly what you have been searching for all along. In the end, their story was simple. A man and a woman met during a snowstorm. They fell in love. They built a life together. They raised a family. They grew old side by side. They left behind a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. It was not a complicated story, but it was a true one. And in its simplicity lay its power, because it proved that the best things in life, the most important things, are often the simplest. Love, family, commitment, kindness. These were the building blocks of Yates and Amelia's life together, and they were enough, more than enough. They were everything. And so the story lived on, told around dinner tables and at family gatherings, a reminder to every generation that love was still possible, still worth pursuing, still the greatest adventure of all. The snowstorm had brought Amelia to Yates's barn that fateful night, but it was their choice to love each other that had created the beautiful legacy they left behind. "You belong here with me now." Those words, spoken on that first night, had proved prophetic. Amelia had belonged with Yates, and he with her. They had found their place in the world, their home, their purpose, all wrapped up in each other. And they had shown everyone who knew them what was possible when two people committed fully to loving each other, not just in words but in actions, every single day for the rest of their lives. That was the story of Yates and Amelia Emerson. A love story that began in a snowstorm and lasted a lifetime, creating ripples of love and legacy that would continue for generations to come. And it all started with a simple act of kindness, a helping hand extended to a stranger in need, and the courage to recognize that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the most unexpected encounters. Their love had been tested by time and trial, by hardship and loss, by all the challenges that come with building a life together. And it had emerged stronger with each test, tempered like steel in a forge into something unbreakable. They had shown that love was not just about the easy moments, the romantic gestures, the passionate declarations. It was about showing up day after day, year after year, choosing your partner over and over again, working together to build something beautiful. And they had succeeded beyond measure, creating not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a legacy of love that would inspire and guide generations to come. Their story would be told and retold, a testament to what was possible when two people truly committed to each other and to building a life based on mutual respect, unwavering support, and deep, enduring love. That was the true happy ending of their story. Not that they lived without problems or challenges, but that they faced everything together and emerged with their love intact and stronger than ever. They had proved that fairy tale endings were possible in real life, that true love could last, that commitment and partnership could create something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. And as the snow continued to fall over the Oklahoma landscape, over the ranch they had built together, over their final resting place side by side, their love lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched. The snowstorm had passed long ago, but the warmth it had sparked would burn eternal, a beacon of hope and possibility for all who heard their story and dared to believe that love like theirs was still possible in this world.